You've had a very interesting time in the ANC, and what I'd like to touch upon and get your view on is the relationship the ANC has had with its tripartite alliance partners, which would be the South African Communist Party and COSATU, the Labour Federation. It's been interesting in the sense that there was a time where the partners were sidelined, and I think that's in a previous administration. And then when you came online as head of government, and correct me if I'm wrong, as you came online as head of government, you had a certain view and a different attitude towards the alliance partners. How important is that relationship, and does that relationship of the tripartite alliance, does it still hold water? Is it still relevant in our case today?
Well, that is one of a very important subject. I think we have perhaps suffered a similar kind of problem, wherein, because of the change, those who were, when you were approaching things as the ANC, there was one goal and one goal only: to liberate the country. And there was a common point that was being made, or that was prevalent, that all of us who were members of the ANC were united by the fact that this was to liberate a nation. So the national question played its own role, because the apartheid did not care whether you have money or you don't have, whether you are educated or not. At a national level, if you're not white, you were put one side. And therefore the question of the national issue became the critical kind of the star that we're all looking at. That's where we want to reach. We want to liberate the nation. Even when we were looking at the issue of the workers, what dominated that whilst you were a worker, exploited, etc., but you were also nationally the majority of the population under oppression. Those who were communists, even if they looked at the road to socialism, or the path to socialism, or whatever you call it, there was already a mobilized majority in terms of the nation to go forward. So precisely because of the understanding of our political oppression, national class, etc., that in itself made us to see the cause to be together all the time, to assist each other and to move forward. At times when they see a snake, that's how they make noise.
The joys of being in the village.
Yeah, we are in the village. At times when they see what is this big bird that takes the small one? So they send a message to others, hey, watch. Please, watch.
They're facing their own struggle here.
Absolutely facing their own struggle. Now, the issue that faced us And by the way, many of us knew that once we deal with the national question, there will be another phase that will come in. That what is happening today, we knew we will differ very fundamentally when we could not differ during the struggle. And it is in the nature of what people would call the things that you cannot avoid by wishing. They become a reality. That, for an example, during the struggle, we had communists, we had capitalists, we had nationalists, we had everything. But the nature of our oppression made those forces to come together. And that's why, if you look at the history of South African struggle, you'll realize that precisely because of apartheid, people are not allowed of different groupings, even if they shared the same views, to be together. For an example, if you take the Communist Party, because it had views not just against apartheid only, but against a particular system, whether you were white or not white, that was not the issue. And therefore, according to apartheid, this organization was not good at all. Not just because it wanted to change society from capitalism to socialism, but because it was, in a sense, interfering with the apartheid, the separation of people. If you're in a communist party, you then you are a member of the Communist Party. There was no any member of the Communist Party who's white must belong to a Communist Party that is white or black. It was one. So there were a number of reasons why it had to be silenced earlier than other organizations, for example, in 1950. But that created an underground platform. In other words, the platform of the party deciding to operate invisibly in the country. And therefore, its struggle was a very serious struggle, one socialism, etc. What is above? But it must assist those who liberate themselves in different other forms, like the national form, for an example. But it was also important that it was in the course of the struggle that the very party, the Communist Party, which is the main driver of the organization of the workers, the trade union movement, and the conscientization of the workers that, in fact, as long as the system, whether you call it any other name, but the capitalist system is there to exploit the workers, not to help them. And therefore, the idea of the communists is that you need to destroy the system because the system is not right. But for the communists to do so, people who must constitute the bulk of the membership of the communists should be the workers, because they are the ones who have got nothing to lose if they destroy the capitalist system, right?
Yes.
So that is why that apartheid in South Africa assisted to sharpen, even whether you call it the national struggle, whether you call it the workers' struggle through the trade unions, and you wanted the workers to understand it even much better. And that's why, for an example, it were the communists who felt in South Africa, because of the nature of oppression, and which is doubled and tripled, they must therefore take it upon themselves to organize a different type of a trade union. Not a trade unionist who is looking at the conditions at the factory floor only, but to look at the political side of the struggle as well. That once you were employed, but there were laws that were not necessarily the business of factory laws, but the laws that were governing the people. And therefore, as workers, you did not want, according to the communists then, you did not want to have a situation where you have a trade union movement which fights for wages only, but it must go beyond that. And they must be shown that, in fact, beyond just freedom, you have a system that you needed to destroy, so that you have got a system that will take care of everyone, the socialist system. So this mixture in South Africa, mixture and combination, became so crucial in the struggle that, in fact, at the beginning, because the Communist Party was banned, could not be part of any open alliance or whatever. What helped the freedom fighters was, in fact, the apartheid, because then you have got the ANC, but if you're an Indian, you're a colored, you're a white, you had no right to join the ANC because it was the African organization. Equally, if you're in the ANC, you couldn't join the Indian organization as well. So that's what brought the first alliance, wherein they then said, let us work as an alliance because it can't be in the same kind of organization. So they created their own, which is called the Alliance, which was led by the ANC, the South African Indian Congress, Colored People's Congress, Congress of Democrats, which was a Congress which was for the whites, and then the trade union movement, which was SACTU at the time. So the politics of the alliance emerged as a result of the prevailing conditions in South Africa. Now, it's important to study it from there because then, because this powerful alliance was really delivering the serious blows to apartheid, what then you ended up with was the apartheid regime banning the ANC as well. Other words, outlawing the ANC in an attempt to disorganize, deal with the leaders of the union, etc. But what did that do? It actually helped the ANC to go underground as well. So underground, the ANC and the party were now in the same platform. So they could do anything without the enemy seeing.
When you say the ANC and the party, which are you talking about, the Communist Party? Or?
The Communist Party, yeah, the South African Communist Party,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So ending with that, you dealt with the situation. I mean, you were confronted with the situation that other organizations like the Congress of Democrats, because many of its members were members in any case of the party or of whatever. And COSATU, SACTU at the time, was then challenged by the state. The state dealt with its leadership, banned its leadership, etc. And many of them were members of the ANC in any way. There was also an emergence of getting into the armed struggle, where in another organization which was also operating underground, Mkhonto weSizwe, had to be born underground, not appear anywhere else, just announce itself. So that many of these members, some of the members were in the Congress of Democrats, Colored People's Congress, whatever, they would be party off. But it was an organization that was not legal in any way. So you ended up with a new kind of an alliance being forged underground, which was now including ANC, the South African Communist Party in particular, and COSATU, and SACTU rather, at the time.
Yes.
Now, the South African struggle had taught us that all of us are fighting for the common goal, although the stages and distances will be different whatsoever. So when then we got our freedom, I'm merely touching on this to show that the alliance became a very unique political organization in South Africa. When, for an example, the issue of the workers to be on the ground all the time was important, ANC, the South African Communist Party, and SACTU worked hard to establish COSATU, so that there is now a new organization that operates and is important for the mobilization of the workers. So we all thought alike. We wanted freedom, belonged to us, etc., etc. Once we were free, we reached a particular, very important halfway, as the communists would call it, wherein communists who were ANC, cadres of the ANC at the same time, had to participate in the new setup now to run the government, etc., etc.
Yes.
As well as some workers who were leaders of the workers who had now played their part, but also there was this huge task of running a country. I said when I was remarking other days, the interest, therefore, the interest of individual members, which was put together in one basket by the national question. Once the national question was gone, right?
Yes.
Only to talk about how to build a nation, etc. But you were not oppressed because you were black. You were free to do anything. So if I wanted to do a business, I became a business. In fact, many comrades who were prisoners, who were in UDF, who were in the ANC, became business people. Now, once that happens, the wish to move forward to other areas became a problem. What happened? Hardcore communists really were now doing something else. So the Communist Party as an organization fell into the hands at that time of people who had just joined the party. Some of them who joined it as we were unbanned. The party itself loosened the manner in which it was able to stick to its discipline. Things, for an example, in the party, wherein if you were recruited in the party when it was operating underground, you did not go to these offices to join, not at all. You were spotted, recruited, and then once you were recruited, your first stage will be to be given a particular period within which you will be introduced to the party. You'll be taught, you'll be allocated somebody who comes to you to introduce what is called Marxism. In other words, in the party, you wouldn't just come in because you love it, and then you sit there. But there will be indeed highly organized way. You will be put in what they call before you are accepted to join as a full party. What do you call it? I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay.
So that you'll be deliberately taught, and somebody will be looking at your progress to grasp the Marxism, Leninism, to understand politics in its own, in a scientific way.
So it was a sort of training. It was a sort of
yes, training.
A vetting mechanism as well.
Yeah, it was called, you are in the process of probation.
Okay, probation. Okay.
You are being taught, you are meeting certain people, you don't know others, until they are satisfied that you have grasped sufficiently that you could become a member of the party, and you are disciplined, you are everything. There will then be a recommendation that you can now join. If you have finished your probation, you become a member, you are introduced to a cell, to comrades that we are going to working with. In other words, up until we got our freedom, if you said that was a communist, or that is a communist, you knew whatever issue you raise with it, you knew the discipline is understood. But once we got our freedom, the party itself relaxed that kind of approach. The party was like any mess party. I mean, you come, you join. If there is a public meeting of the party, they issue out forms for you to join. Now, you will have people there who would not understand exactly the Marxism, the Marxist-Leninist kind of theory. So that in itself would be a weaker point from the party itself.
Yes.
Then you have COSATU, who was there. Quite a number of them were taken into government. And of course, again, COSATU remained for a long time. What I must also indicate is that our enemies, fundamental enemies, were at work to undermine the ANC, to undermine the party, to undermine COSATU. So as we moved in, for the first time, there were some difficulties at times between the party leadership, the ANC leadership, COSATU leadership. But the lack of those people that I have just described in the party, of people who entered the party in a particular way, who had a particular understanding, that began to undermine the continuity of the alliance at the level at which it was before freedom. Now, you then were faced with a situation wherein some people, for an example, what the party will expect that the ANC should do, what the party should do. Want to push the ANC to implement what otherwise is supposed to be implemented by the party. But also, the eagerness to get into government rather than to proceed with the struggle to socialism. Now, if you were a party cadre, there's one thing and one thing only that is put in the mind of a party cadre, that you fight to destroy the capitalist society and establish socialism, which will lead you to communism. Now, if the party cadres are then participating more in the government, in everything, which is not a socialist government, right?
Yeah.
Who is fighting for the socialist or the new change to kill capitalism? You end up with the party cadres who become involved in the capitalist society, who must go be a minister, and what they are, in other words, they're trying to make the system, which in terms of their belief cannot work. But they spend more time. They fight, don't take this minister out, blah, blah. That's not their business. The business of the party is to fight to destroy capitalism so that you can get at socialism. So once the party was not moving very well, then the weakness of the union itself, and that's why, therefore, the alliance began to be a problem. I think some of us tried to put it together, but we were late because people, as I say, they were now, you had the bourgeoisie in the ANC, you had the capitalists in the ANC, who were part of the ANC, part of the ANC leadership. But you also had the unions that began to have companies that are run by or owned or that the unions, the federations were participating in. So, in other words, what was the cutting edge of going forward? We were no longer going there, we began to participate here. And that's why, even if there were party who are known to be very honest, strong, etc., or there were workers who must understand the position of the workers, once we had not thought out of this, you become part of the broader ANC in the sense, correctly to influence the ANC, but those elements that were thinking differently in the ANC began to influence people wrongly. That is why, if we talk about Nazareth, people will tell you about comrades being bought. And even if the party people noticed that there were some things that were going wrong, they were like helpless. So that the cadre that we had before began to slip away. And our fundamental enemies found an opportunity to disrupt us, destroy us, make us fight, etc. So the alliance itself became weaker and weaker and weaker. And I've given a long story because it is absolutely important to understand that what at the end counts is consciousness and understanding and honesty, that to fight for what you're fighting for. Quite a number of times in public meetings where I was dealing with communists, I raised the issue. Why communists are no longer talking about socialism? When are we getting to socialism? Who is fighting socialism if they were busy participating in hurly-burly squabbles, etc.? I think, therefore, the alliance, in my view, at this point in time is at the weakest point. All of them, they will have to sit back and replan. The alliance needs to meet and say, how do we distribute our work, for an example? What is the job of the ANC today? I think we need to define it properly from our own point of view. We want a democratic South Africa as described by the Freedom Charter. Fine, that's what we are going for. You cannot expect the ANC to go beyond that. Because it's not a communist. The ANC is a democratic organization. We need the Communist Party to sit back and say, how do we quicken the process to socialism? And what are the things we need to do in order to establish socialism? Because as long as the system is not the system that benefits the people, everyone, but is a system that benefits a few, then we and generations to come will suffer. In our situation, we thought that the ANC will help give us a better terrain if we were communists to move forward. That's what's supposed to happen. But one of the jobs of the communists is to work hard to ensure that workers are not made or run in a capitalistic manner, that they are able to fight for conditions. And how do you meet this? We did not meet and say, we are now in the new conditions. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with our alliance? At times, there's been fights as if there is no tomorrow between the alliance. Wanting these ones, wanting this to do this by force or whatever. It is all not good at all.
I agree.
We have had people beginning to have attitudes against others. I think we still have to sit back and to sit back, to draw us, to say, how do we further the struggle? In the communists, they can't say, we are free now, we are celebrating Freedom Days, it's the end of the story. With them, we have not arrived. As we know, the theory of Marxism and Leninism. So, in other words, to answer in what we're going a long way, the alliance itself, I think, it at times just exists in name. Even when they meet, the kind of issues they're discussing leave a lot to be desired.
I think so. I think if one looks at it from the outside looking in, because we haven't been, some of us haven't been party to the meetings and discussions historically and currently as well. You look at the alliance, ANC on one side, you've got the South African Communist Party. It's taken some very interesting, bold decisions. It's taken some interesting stances that seem not to be communist in its existence, to a point where they've sided. You know, historically, they will be judged for that. That's a fact. They've sided with capital. There's certain decisions, there's certain agreements that they've had with a capitalistic view, the way capital has done things, the way capital has proposed in doing things. They have actually stood in defense, not even neutral, in defense of the capitalistic approach, which is very strange to some of us. And then if you look at the Workers' Federation, I mean, no secret, there's different, it's fragmented. There's different unions within the federation that have pulled away because of whatever reason. They know better than any of us do. So I think it's an interesting time where you have a fragmented alliance, not just as the tripartite alliance, but within themselves, where decisions taken, stances taken are completely contrary to their belief, to their core, to the DNA of what these institutions stand for. So that's my view on that. It's a very simplistic one, but it is a layman's view from the way we see it.
It's an interesting view, very direct, interesting.
No, I mean, the SACP, I think one can say it's no more South African Communist Party, it's a South African Capitalist Party, because they've taken that stance. But that's just me.